Welcome to the Tracking Connections podcast, and thanks for listening.
We feature voices from around the world sharing stories of working intentionally with deep nature connection in ways that transform lives, families, projects, and communities. I'm Sarah.
I'm Aidan.
And I'm John.
And we are your hosts from Living Connection First.
Well, hello. Welcome to episode 13 of Tracking Connections podcast. This is John, and I'm here with Sarah and Aidan. And we're going to reflect a little bit on tracking connections and what that means to us through some story sharing and some reflections. But I first want to say that, here on this day when we're recording, we're in that time of year which we call mid-morning. It's, May 13th. And it is a time when the grass is growing really fast here in the Santa Cruz Mountains, and the lizards are literally everywhere. I'm out doing some landscaping work, and I have to pause and wait for a lizard to run by, and I'm sitting working on something, laying on my side, kind of trying to get something straight on the patio, and a lizard comes up and hops up next to me and is hanging out on a rock right next to my head. And it's just an interesting observation that my son Aidan made about how this time of year, that mid-morning motivational species archetype is really actually strong, and the lizards are everywhere, and kids just love it, and they're so motivated. So yeah, I'm just feeling, grateful for that observation, and just all the things that are happening, the birds feeding their young, and there's just so much moving so fast right now. It's really, yeah, truly a motivational time of year, and that energy is felt by everyone. The busyness of spring, but and when I say everyone, I mean everyone: the plants, the birds, the insects. It's happening. So yeah, I'll pass it over to Sarah to say hello.
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm feeling really grateful. This morning I got to see Grace, who is a female coyote that we've known here ever since we moved in here, actually. So it's been about 3.5 years. We haven't been seeing Grace very often because she's got some pups in the den. And yeah, just feeling into her vibe. She is a very beautiful dog. And we see her partner, who we named Champ, fairly frequently, and he's wonderful as well. But seeing her, oh man, we named her Grace for a reason. She has just this beautiful presence about her. She's so calm, she's so relaxed, and just to see her and kind of feel into what she's been up to, tending puppies, and probably pretty worn out. She kind of had that vibe of like, yeah, it's been a lot. And she actually had a little scrape on her head where the fur had been scraped off or perhaps pulled off. And so now I have this question around how did that happen? She looks well. She doesn't look like she's injured. So I have this kind of image of a puppy pulling hair out of her head. Anyway, I'm really grateful to have seen her this morning, and grateful to have this conversation today. So I'll pass it over to Aidan.
Yeah, hi everybody. Great to be here. This morning, my gratitude, I'm reflecting on this amazing weekend we had out in nature. First, thinking about my two children, 12 and 11, who were just obsessed with catching the fence lizards. They just kept asking us to run when we were walking out in the woods. We were going from redwood groves, and there were patches of sunlight, and we just kept seeing them run from one patch of sunlight to the next, just looking for the lizards and seeing if they could find them and catch them, chasing them up trees and looking under redwood bark for them. And it was just amazing to kind of see that energy in their body when they're just so drawn to these animals. And that idea of the motivational species, it really becomes clear what we mean when you see the effect that these lizards have on those two. And then my second gratitude would be yesterday being out at this lovely horse ranch and meeting this incredible horse named Bocce, and a bunch of other wonderful horses too. And being in the ranch and just being out in the pasture with Bocce and with the horses, and hearing the cowbirds singing and going around and doing their things, and the mockingbirds having their territorial battles. And we saw a hooded oriole as well. And just the feeling of just being out and having that timeless moment out there, and just what an incredible presence horses can bring to that, to just make you feel so grounded. So that's what I'm feeling grateful for right now. And I'll pass it back to you, Dad.
Thank you, Aidan. Yeah, we were having a bit of a laugh this morning. What do we mean by tracking connections? And it is it's an important question, because it tracking connection is a little bit like trying to catch smoke in a bowl. We don't often pay attention to the nuance of when things feel connective and when they don't. We might feel uncomfortable when it doesn't feel connective, but we don't often stop to think, well, what if we actually track connection and tried to boost it, essentially, And in my experience, I could just say, kind of in a oversimplified way, because I focus so much on connection, I am very aware of it when it's there, when it's not, especially when it's not. It has a definite signature. When it's there, it's fun, and I always say, you're working with connection because you're having fun, or you're moving into a deeply moving conversation. You might even go to tears, which you might not think is fun, but the tears flow when the connection is strong, and there's just a depth to honoring and lifting up connection. And why is that important? Well, having been a mentor for as many years as I have, I guess it's 1979 is when I sort of began to identify as a mentor, becoming aware that I was helping others make a connection or not. I began to really train myself to pay attention to when the person that I was working with and serving as a mentor, I would be watching for the moments when their lights would come on, where I would really feel them present, where I would really feel us dropping in. It could be as simple as somebody being really stuck in their analytical brain trying to solve a problem versus dropping into that core place of deep curiosity and being okay with these open-ended questions that make us have to look around more, makes us have to turn over redwood bark, as Aidan's children were demonstrating, and, stand back and scratch our heads and ask each other questions and, try to solve a mystery together. But it's so easy for that to become disconnective. And so, and in those moments, lessons can fall flat and then it doesn't feel as fun. And maybe tracking is boring, or maybe identifying plants is boring, and now I'm talking about the perception of the person who's being mentored. So having keen awareness and focus on when connection is happening is pretty critical. And I know Sarah has a great story to illustrate exactly what I'm talking about. And I'll pass it over to you, Sarah.
For those of you who don't know, I'm really passionate about tracking, wildlife tracking, and had the opportunity recently to bring other people out tracking to kind of introduce them to how to follow the mystery of the landscape. And then even more recently, I joined a group as a participant to understand their style of presenting tracking. And what I found really interesting, well, first we found this really cool sign in some very silty soil where there was a gut pile, a small gut pile of the intestines of a medium-sized rodent is what we assumed, or what we, got to. And then there were these other, marks in the sand, in the soil, that appeared to be owl tracks. And we were trying to figure out what size owl would fit those tracks. And we got to a place of, we didn't know the answer completely. And there was kind of two flows in the group. One was kind of stuck in that place of continuing to analyze. And then there was another section of people that were wanting to let go of the questions and see what we could find, right? So for me, I took that route of, okay, I accept that I do not know the answer here. And I would like to look onto the landscape and see if there's other, clues that I can follow. And, I started asking the question, well, where was, the owl killed the animal here? And then where did it go? And there was like telephone poles that it may have perched on. And then there was a big barn in the distance that maybe that's where, if it was a barn owl, maybe that's where it was hanging out. Anyway, so for me to follow that mystery feels really fun and interesting. And I get really curious, right? Like I don't I don't know the answer. Okay, that's cool. Maybe nature will show me. Maybe if I actually open my mind and my awareness, the next clue will show itself, versus that tendency to want to know, right? Like, okay, we're going to continue to analyze and stay in the intellectual mind until we figure it out, as a really different journey, right? Like, what are we following? Are we following our intellectual mind toward, it's like almost impossible. If you don't know the answer, you don't know the answer. But if you can redirect and open up to finding other data points, right, and creating other connections, then we can actually move toward the possibility of learning more, and then possibly knowing the answer, because it's become very clear. If the telephone pole, if it had had owl scat below it, and if it had had a pellet below it, then we would say, oh, wow, this is another piece of the mystery. So tracking connection, right? Once we're connecting to the track of the owl, and we're connecting to the gut pile, and then we're connecting to each other, asking questions, and then letting go of, I'm still trying to like discern what is that thing. It's like the monkey mind, our gorilla mind that is kind of only seeing in a linear way, like just letting that go and moving toward what are the other connections that are possible here for us to make together. For me to stay in that intellectual battering of needing to know is like, oh my gosh, can we please not do that? It's so unsatisfying, really, versus the feeling of tracking connections in the landscape, which is like an adventure. So I think I'll just pause there and pass it along.
I really like what you're saying here, because it relates to what I was noticing in the kids when we were out in the park this weekend. Their curiosity and interest is what it is. And there's this moment where you, as a mentor, have to recognize, okay, I'm more interested in the answer to this than they are. And if in that moment you push, you could actually push them in the opposite direction. The kids do such a good job of reminding us of this, because they have no trouble being honest. To be like, no, I don't care, or I'm running away. Sometimes they just run away if they're not interested. For me, when I'm on my own journey, I think about music a lot in this way. I had probably a solid decade where I was just obsessed with finding that deeper answer. I wanted to be able to listen to a song and just be able to pick out exactly what was happening almost in real time, and I wanted to know every type of chord and be able to recognize it just by ear, passing in a set of chords, and just going down these really, really deep journeys. And I had a couple of friends who had similar levels of fire. And to our credit, I think both, all of us were music teachers. We recognized that our interest to go deeper on these things and to kind of become obsessive with these, finding these answers, was not the same thing as a student who was coming in and wanted to learn 3 chords of their new favorite song, and really, the importance of meeting somebody where they're at. And, that requires us to slow down, to pay attention, to do more listening than talking, and to really sort of read the body language and the expressions of the person, and to see, okay, they're interested in learning this D chord, but I can see their fingers are really struggling with it right now. So I thought I was going to teach them 4 chords today, but maybe we're only going to do 2, and we're just going to jam with those 2 chords instead of getting to the next chords. And what a profoundly different experience that is than me on my own journey wanting to dig in and learn that next inversion of a diminished chord in this jazz tune, and play arpeggios on all 6 strings. Or there's just so much nuance there in sort of learning how to be in those different roles, and to realize, okay, I'm in the role right now where I'm facilitating connection for somebody else, and I'm there to listen and to watch and to see what is exciting for them. That's where your story took me, is just thinking about that idea, and how much we can kill connection, I think, if we instead push too hard when the interest isn't there in the other person.
Yeah, the danger of overthinking, I mean, it's kind of it. I have taught tracking for so many years, and there's a point where people get into this very focused place on their learning journey, and it's really important for them to know and to be right. They want to feel like they're learning the lessons and recognizing search images, getting ready for their evaluation, to make sure that they are recognized as competent. And it's at that stage that sometimes it can be not very fun to hang around with people like that in that stage. I mean, it's an important stage. You got to go through it. And I think there's something lost. It's like we lose the magic, because Sarah was so nicely describing magic, and as well you, Aidan, with music, because music can be so connective when people aren't trying to be good, and I remember one of the members of our village, Jack, reflecting on this, that he was in a competitive school and he was playing in the music department, so to speak, and music wasn't very fun. It felt competitive. It felt like you had to prove yourself. And he recognized that he wanted to be a better person through music, and he discovered that tracking that connection, that when do I feel connected? When do I feel like I'm really playing with these other people, and that we're actually all dropping in and having that really good feeling that comes with connection, and so, tracking connection is worth time. It is worth your attention and intention, because connection is very special. We have no problem as people connecting with our pets. We all intuitively know how to do that. We have no problem connecting with our very young children when they're pre-verbal, and all we have is what we feel in that relationship. And if you can be mindful of that feeling and pull it up and know when there's more joy, when there's more vitality, when there's that really good listening going on, and that sense of empathy, and where we're really being helpful to each other and feeling awe and wonder together, and there's love flowing, and we're in that quiet mind. I mean, these are the hallmarks of connection, and when you can bring that to, even tasks that feel meaningful, it can shift the whole experience from feeling like a burdensome task to, hey, this is fun. I'm having fun right now, right? So again, I'm emphasizing that fun. But there's so much depth in what can happen when we surrender to connection and make that part of our intentionality. So I'll stop there, and yeah, just thanks for your reflections, and I'll pass it to you, Sarah, for your thoughts there.
Yeah, I love the valuing of connection, right? There's an imbalance, I think, in our society, our way of being with the world, where the kind of the scientific mind is the dominant mindset, right? Of in order to fulfill a status, or be accepted, or for the information to be important, it needs to be known and defined, right? Versus if we're tracking for connection, it's valuing these attributes of joy and love and all those good feelings, right? Like, how did we get off track where that became secondary, or forgotten completely that might be the purpose of how to be in the world? So how do we design for really putting that first, right? Well, that's the name of connection first, right? That's the value system that we're trying to uphold, and really how generative that is on so many levels, personally, on the level of just true abundance and health and relationships. Yeah, that just want to say also that that's our intention with the podcast, is tracking connection. There's so many ways to do it, and so many people who are working with connection principles in this network. And we really want to hear how people are doing it, what the results are, what it means to them to be working with connection practices with nature and with other people.
So a question that I have that's coming up is just around this idea of the modern world, putting so much emphasis on the scientific mind, as you put it, Sarah, and productivity. We're talking about connection, and I'm sharing stories of going out on the weekend with my kids, and but is there a role for connection in our day-to-day work lives and our so-called productive lives too? Or is it actually, something that we're trying to have to put into the sides and around the edges? Or is there actually a way in which this practice of connection and tracking connections in ourselves can actually be in alignment with our work lives and maybe even help us to find more joy and productivity in our lives?
Well, I think I remember when we were working with a business consultant back in 2007, and he admonished us for taking 20, 30 minutes to wipe off road dust and offer gratitude before we got into the agenda of the meeting. And he said to us, if you say the meeting is starting at 9 and you really don't get to the agenda until 9:30, you should just say that so I could show up at 9:30 instead. Because, high-level business consultant, he'd been working with executive teams at big international corporations and, big NGOs and government offices, and he was all business, right? And we said to him, well, wait, you told us that we have to use our model to run our business. I did say that, he said. But, you guys aren't getting down to business until 9:30. And I said, yeah, but we're connection first. So we actually are taking time to connect. Well, he was a little grumpy about that. But about 3 months later, after working with us, every week, 3 days a week for 3 months, he apologized to all of us. And he said to us that I really was critical of you, and I thought you were wasting time and you were wasting my time. But I have never seen a business team come together with such unity, such creativity, such ingenuity, and so much productivity. You guys put these other company cultures to shame. Now I see the value in connecting first. But it's not something that's immediately obvious to people right away, right? Because they're used to getting down to business. Okay, well, here's the agenda. Let's start. Let's go, right? Go straight to that south focus, so to speak, right? And no, our model says, no, first we hold space, welcome each other, wipe off the road dust, offer gratitude together, bring ourselves to the present, even if it takes a little bit. It's worth the 20 minutes to bring everyone into the present, because then the productivity rises. And of course, the man who wrote Sacred Hoops, Phil Jackson, he had the Chicago Bulls 5 NBA championships. He speaks about the same thing. Like, he was able to increase the team's performance by working on things that built connection first. Victor Wooten talks about this with music. So I think there is plenty of places in modern times for this to fit in. And I think you might lose a little on the front end, focusing on connection, but you're going to gain on the back end when people come together unified and they hit that zone together, things just really spark and a lot of magic happens. So, that's a long answer, but I could have just said yes.
Yeah. And also committing to our personal practice of connection with nature and music and that creative aspect of life, where it is actually changing our brain. It's bringing in that implicit felt sense experience that tends to be more of the right brain experience with our left brain intelligence, that part of us that, gets things done and is more linear. And the practices of connection, whether it's connecting with nature or music or other people, it actually brings us into a greater capacity, or our intellectual brain has a connection to our creative brain. So we actually are creating, the opportunity to function in a holistic way as an individual showing up. So I know for sure music does that for me, where I'm like, okay, my linear brain is like so locked in on something. So I need to play the guitar and sing songs and get my other part of my brain and being moving and integrated and involved in the experience. And then I can come back to a creative project with an integrated being where I'm tapping into all or much more of what I am. And same thing with going out for a walk in nature and tuning into all of my senses and expanding my mind out onto the landscape and connecting with my relationships that I have on the land. When I do that, I actually bring that back to, say, business meetings or again, creative projects, where I'm functioning from a place where my inner genius, that part of us that's kind of beyond the linear mind actually gets to move into the linear experience.
I love this because it sounds like what you're both saying is that there's so much more emphasis on how. It's less about what we are doing and more about how are we showing up and how are we taking time to sort of get ourselves in tune. If my guitar is out of tune, it doesn't matter what I know on that guitar. It's going to sound off, and it's going to affect people that are listening to it in a negative way because I'm out of tune and I can't bring the right energy. And I heard Victor Wooten talk about this at one point, and just this idea that our mind, we're taking in all this information, but we also have that focus where our mind can focus, and it's like, what channel are you tuning into, right? And just like the radio dial, depending on the frequency that you tune into, you're going to get completely different information. You're going to have a completely different experience. And so I love this idea of taking that time to tune ourselves and to tune in with each other and be ready to show up in our best way.
Mm.
Yeah, I love that. And I love the idea of nature. I was having a really tough time with something emotionally about a week ago, and I was just drawn to go and sit outside. And I sat under this tree, and I just was with the tree and could just feel the tree was with me. I could feel its presence, and I could feel the presence of the earth, and just felt this amazing capacity that nature has and that the earth has to sort of be with whatever it is we're showing up with that day. And I know that, a lot of us are, going to therapy for this or that, or we have people that we can talk to that listen to us. But I really am, very aware of nature's unlimited or seemingly unlimited capacity to just hold space for whatever it is that I need. And it was just amazingly healing for me to be able to just sit out there and be sad and sort of express the things I needed to express and feel the things I needed to feel. And I really felt after, just about 10 minutes of sitting there, it was as if I had had a conversation with a really good listener. And I had felt heard and felt that space held for me. And I could just feel what a difference it made for me in the rest of my day after I had done that, and how much it lifted up my energy going forward from there.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love how you just so eloquently presenced, what am I bringing to my connection with people? How am I showing up? And then also John talking about the connection practices that precede our business meetings, right? Precede all of our conversations, and how that connection with each other. And I like looking at it through the lens of working together. When we're connecting with each other intentionally before we start work, we're creating a sense of safety with each other that allows, again, our capacity to access higher creativity and our intelligence. In polyvagal theory, they talk about how when we don't feel safe, we basically shut down a lot of our capacity for full functioning. And when we feel really safe with other people, then we can open into our potential and be in a homeostatic place, a place of homeostasis where things can move in a way that's generative, abundant, and emergent.
Nicely summarized there, both of you. I love that innocent question you asked, Aidan. That opened up a whole nother portal of tracking connections. So thank you for that. Yeah, and I hope you all enjoyed this conversation. It's us tracking connection ourselves right now, and appreciate this moment to reflect with both of you. And I hope our listeners enjoyed that.
Yeah, thanks for tuning in, everyone.
Thanks, everybody. We'll see you next time.
Thanks for listening to Tracking Connections. You can find everything related to the podcast and our current offerings at trackingconnections.net. We'll see you next time.